The loop.
The loop. You have the divine spark. The loop.
Do or do not. There is no try.
The loop.
In your
Hey there, this is Misha, and welcome to episode number 9 of The Loop, the podcast where I interview career experts and coaches to unpack all their tips and advice for the interview, doing better in your job, finding more meaningful work, and much, much more. I'm feeling very zen today, and I think that maybe comes out in our conversation. I don't know if it was because of my meditation session this morning or maybe because of my guest today, Geoff. He's got a very grounding sort of energy. So we had a really calm but very insightful and useful conversation. So a little bit more about Geoff. So today's guest, Geoff Mendal, is a former engineer at Google, where he spent over 10 years. He's also at Pandora as a director of engineering and has been coaching lots of people throughout his tenure at these companies, has been interviewing lots of people, has been a career coach, and more recently has been a professional career coach, helping lots and lots of people prepare for interviews and level up in their roles. Today's conversation is all about the leadership interview and the leadership qualities that Google is looking for. I think this actually applies to any company, but we really get into the definition of leadership that Google has, what their expectations are in the interview, very specific scenarios and interview questions that Geoff has actually asked in the interview and sometimes trip people up. So he has some really good feedback and advice on how to answer those, and just tons of other stories and tips around this part of the interview at Google. So if you have a interview coming up, obviously at Google or any other tech company, really, I think this should be a really interesting conversation for you, and I hope you enjoy. Hey, Geoff, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Misha, nice to see you again.
Yeah, so I'm excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking a lot about Google, your experience at Google, and more specifically, the leadership aspect to the interview process, which is a big part of what Google is looking for. So before we jump into that, I would love to get a little bit more background and context for our listeners about your time at Google. So I know you were there for more than 10 years. You're also at Pandora. And I would love to know a little bit more about, what are some of the roles that you had at Google and what you did there. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, happy to. So I came in to work on the source code control team as an individual contributor. When I started, they didn't give levels. You had to prove yourself, and then you earned your level about 6 months later. They had a general idea, but they wouldn't assign it. That's different today. People know what they're going for. So I worked on some pretty hairy problems at scale with source control. And then, I don't know if you call it promoted, but was given the opportunity to manage that team. So the folks that were my peers then became my direct reports. That's an interesting transition, one that really tests leadership. And from there, I took on a little bit wider role with tools and build systems, and then moved over to Android for about the last 3 to 4 years of my career at Google.
And you were sort of the last few years, you were engineering manager, or what was your role?
No, back as an individual contributor. So not so unique at Google, actually, for people to move around. But to go from IC to manager back to IC is a little bit tricky, but I did that.
Okay. So you just love to code?
Well, it really wasn't a coding role. Again,
Okay.
it was more tools and build systems related. Operational piece. I was kind of a cross between a release engineer and an SRE.
Okay.
So didn't do a lot of heavy coding. Wasn't interested in that. More of a fill the hole type of guy.
Okay. Got it. Well, yeah. So it sounds like, you've been on many battlefields and in several different roles there.
Yeah.
So the leadership aspect of all this, obviously both in individual contributor roles and management positions, is very relevant and something Google looks for in the interview process. So I'd love to just jump into that.
Sure.
And understand a little bit more about what is Google really looking for and what do they mean when they say leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question because the term itself is conflated. When most people think about leadership, they think about a person in authority, someone who has a big title and can wield a big stick, very decisive, and good use of authority. That's not what Google means at all. When Google thinks of leadership, they think of it as a verb, not a role, not a person. So a leader is different than leadership. Google believes that leadership can be practiced by anyone at any role, at any level, anytime, anywhere. But that it's a risky activity to entertain. So that's why it's practiced only rarely when needed and appropriate, and hopefully never alone. I know that's probably...
Can we dig into that?
Probably give a
why is it risky? It sounds scary. Tell me more about it.
Google is a big place. It is, despite what people think, it is somewhat chaotic. At least it was when I was there. Maybe a little bit more structured and organized now, but nevertheless has a hierarchy. Everybody has a boss. As you get higher and higher, of course, you have more authority and more say, and bigger decisions can be made, and people salute and listen to you. That's not leadership at all. Leadership is about bucking that status quo, about making sure that Google is doing the right things at the right time. And if people see a problem or have a question, they're encouraged to speak up. Sometimes that's very, very difficult to do. Who would go up against a senior VP who has a vision, a strategy, presumably has thought a lot about a problem, and say, I don't think this is the right thing to do, or we're not doing it in the right way? Or have you thought about it? In fact, leadership being a verb could be as simple as speaking up in a meeting and going with the I don't understand why we're doing this. Can someone explain it? That would be an act of leadership. Or it doesn't seem like people are really sold on this idea. Am I the only one feeling this way? Anybody can say that. Very few do. But those
that's really interesting.
Of behaviors, those kind of actions, what I would like to call and do call leadership moments that can make all the difference between success and failure. Google counts on people who are on the front lines, people who don't have a lot of authority, who are individual contributors but are very close to the problem, to speak up and give a report and tell their opinion and what they see. And that is valued and needed at a place like Google, where everything is done at scale, is risky, and to just have the brain trust, the star chamber of very senior executives making all the decisions would not serve the interests of a Google, where how would they know the answer? Why do you think they would know the answer? They look down to see where to get the real answers.
I like that definition a lot because, like you said, I think it's very conflated with leadership is very conflated with people management and sort of herding the cats, right?
Yeah.
So what you just said is a little bit surprising to me, and maybe to a lot of listeners, because you're basically talking about just, you're being brave, being courageous, being true to sort of the values there and your values, and like speaking up, right? And that's a big part of leadership. And
that is tested in the interview, and people may not realize it. It can be tricky, like an assist design interview. A candidate might get challenged on, well, why did you decide to go with a NoSQL horizontally scalable distributed database? Why didn't you go with a relational database? Wouldn't it be better to have structured data and tables, and you have the ability to join and transaction support? That could be the interviewer challenging the candidate. And how the candidate responds to that challenge, and authority challenging them, could be demonstrating leadership. Right? Well, no, here's why I chose it. Yes, you're correct that there may be some benefit to going the other way, but I see some consequences here in terms of cost, maintenance, scalability, and why do we need transactions anyway? My little hypothetical here, that's an example of pushing back on authority in a way that is productive and meant to get to a great decision. Instead of, yes, Mr. Manager Director, you're right. Let's do it that way. And making a decision just based on someone's authority, which could have really dire consequences for a production system at scale, at Google size, could be an utter disaster and on the front page of the New York Times. So there's an expectation that people will challenge authority in a proper way to get to the right result.
Got it. That's very insightful. And by that definition, you definitely don't need to have people management responsibilities or even experience to be a leader and to demonstrate that by Google standards. And other than that, other than this part about speaking up and sort of having backbone, what other aspects of leadership are there that they're looking for? Well,
building a coalition around ideas. So again, Google being on the bleeding edge of everything all the time, practically. There's an expectation that if you want to innovate, you have to sell or influence that idea upon others. Make it part of their hearts and minds and their gut. It shouldn't just be ideas coming from the top down or things that are proven out that are not risky. Can you build a coalition? Can you get a set of followers around your idea and then run a pilot on it and scale it and prove it? That might be an active leadership, building that coalition. Doing an intervention in a meeting might be another example. I think I talked about this very briefly before in a meeting. Why are we here meeting? Is anybody getting value out of this time? Might be a way to wake up an organization and get them to do things in a different way or stop doing something that isn't productive. There are many, many examples throughout Google's history of people doing this and having just a wide variety of changes, company-wide or even division-wide, that make all the difference for Google and its users.
I'm wondering, after you left Google, you were at Pandora, right, for a few years.
Yeah.
How did that differ? How did that experience of leadership differ in Pandora versus Google?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is Pandora is a much smaller place, and so I was operating in a smaller environment. Number of people, certainly the vertical that I was in, music streaming, was just one of many things that Google was involved in. So that's one answer. The other answer is not much different at all. And that answer would entail things like, when I got there, hiring was a mess, very chaotic, not well structured. It varied from manager to manager. Everybody had their own way of doing things. And it wasn't that they were doing a bad job. It's just that there was no consistency. There was no way to have a fair evaluation of what was going on. So when I got there, I thought, well, why don't we try some of the Google ideas here? And so I instituted some of that and got some people around that. Took a lot of hard effort, but the results started to come in. We were getting better hires. The process of candidates going through was more efficient. Candidates were having a better experience. Even the ones who didn't get hired said that they really admired how they were interviewed. So all of these things that I tried to introduce through just the Google rigorous way of hiring had a very positive effect. Long term, and built one of the best teams I'd ever built in my career at Pandora, using everything that I had learned from Google. And that actually continues today, many years after I've left Pandora, which is now SiriusXM. It was purchased by that company.
Right.
But yeah, I'm real proud of it.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely there's going to be some differences with the size of company, right? But I think you highlighted the point for Google, because they are so big, it's actually even more important that you have many people, many departments across the organization that are leaders or sort of have those traits, because it is such a big machine, and you need to have people that are pushing back and trying new things. And in some ways, it's easier in a small startup, right? With like 40, 50 people, you can have 3 or 4 kind of more senior experienced people, and you just sort of know what's going on. So it makes sense that would be very important at a larger scale.
Yeah, and Google had a lot of innovative ideas around that. A lot of companies are doing this now, where you look at your next generation of leaders, those who have displayed some emerging leadership behavior, and you grab them early and you coach them and mentor them and train them before they start developing really bad habits. So I was really lucky to be involved in that, both as a participant and then later as a facilitator. So we would catch those who, what Google would call level 5, or the senior software engineer, or likewise SRE. It didn't matter what the role was. They were just starting to get some leadership opportunities in their role. And before they started making a lot of mistakes, we took them off site for 3 days and hammered them with Google's leadership philosophy. So they were off to a good start. And then, of course, there was a lot of support along the way after that. It wasn't just 3 days and good luck to you. That's just one example.
Right.
There are many other examples of Google taking leadership very seriously as an activity to do all the time with everybody, should they want it. There are some people who didn't want it, and that's fine. They could be in their individual contributor role, just code all day, be very productive for the company, and that's all they want. Great. But for those who wanted to take on leadership behaviors, there was many programs that were there for them.
Got it. And so when you were working there, were you also sitting on some hiring panels?
Yes.
And interviewing people?
Both. So
okay.
Pretty much everybody in engineering, if you want to interview, can. You had to get trained to interview, and you had to be you had to shadow first and be blessed and constantly evaluated. Google is just anal with its analytics and its processes to make sure that people are doing a good job and that things are being done fairly and with a high degree of quality. And interviewing, obviously, being one of the most important things that any company can do. Highest ROI and the biggest mistakes are made through interviewing. Google took that very seriously. So yes, I interviewed hundreds of candidates, and also for a time, mostly when I was a manager, was on a hiring panel. They call it the hiring committee.
The hiring committee, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because in that committee, you basically have a folder of the information about the candidate
Yep.
and sort of the feedback from the interview process.
Correct.
And you're looking at a lot of things, obviously technical skills and role-related knowledge and leadership. So on the leadership piece, were there any really specific points that were red flags when you were looking at this folder and from all the feedback within the hiring committee?
Well, yeah, certainly. So if somebody was me first, or it's about me and my career, they really didn't show empathy or any kind of concern for collaboration or cooperation. It wasn't a team first kind of mentality coming from the person. Then those were obviously red flags.
So just on that, it can be, I think it's easy to imagine why, that would be a problem. And I think you would sort of know it when you saw it.
Yes.
Like, oh, this person's not a team player, but sometimes it can be difficult as that person to recognize that in yourself. Like, hey,
Right.
I'm not really,
Right.
maybe I am a team player, but I'm not articulating my experiences properly to show that I'm a team player.
Right.
So what specific, I think as an actual interviewer, like what specifically would people say that showed you, oh, okay, this person is a team player, or no, this person is really not a team player? Like, what sort of advice could you give around that?
So my favorite way to do that would be to present them with scenarios where there's no right answer.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what would you do in this kind of scenario? And it's not binary. They could say anything they wanted, but what they said would reveal how they actually dealt with leadership or didn't deal with leadership.
It's a hypothetical scenario, or
Yeah,
this is something from their experience?
Well, both. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to
Right.
do it. You could say, name a time
Right.
in your career when, or consider this hypothetical scenario where you are in this role, and here's the situation. What would you do? And you listen carefully to see what they say, and more importantly, what they don't say. And that will they will reveal themselves and how they feel about leadership in that answer.
Okay. So if they were to respond with like, I'm going to, go do all the research on my own and maybe talk to a couple people and then just submit the plan, that would be a bad answer if it was very
likely
much a solo activity.
Yeah, it very likely would be. I probably wouldn't ask that question of senior people. I'd make it a lot more tougher. You have a choice between doing X or Y. You can't do both. And there's no clear right way to do something. There are pros and cons. And what do they say? Usually, the best answer is not, I would do X because, or I would do Y because. Someone who's really practicing leadership would say, well, I don't accept your premise. The first thing I would do is go investigate, why not X and Y? Or why not partial X and partial Y? And kind of throw up the chessboard and say, I'm not playing this game. Let's look at different rules. That is an answer that would demonstrate leadership. Like, here's somebody who challenges authority, the interviewer, doesn't accept the premise, and is willing to risk not making a choice, a clear choice, but trying to justify something completely new. That's who we want at Google, as long as what they're saying is authentic, honest, and reasonable.
Got it. So this is really interesting because I think perhaps even if someone would take that action to where they're sort of challenging assumptions, in an interview setting, it can be a little bit different because you feel like you're getting a multiple choice question, right? And these are one of the answers. And so I think keeping in mind that, this is more of a conversation with a colleague, right? And then you can challenge their assumptions. You can change the rules of this conversation or of this game that they're trying to play with you. And I think that'd be really hard for some people because it does feel like an exam or a test, and you sort of have to pick one of these answers. Right. That's totally not the case.
Well, I mean, we're talking about leadership, right? And we go back to
exactly.
our definition of leadership about perturbing the status quo, making an intervention, challenging. If you can't demonstrate that in an interview, and I'll accept it's a hard thing to do in an interview, because one must be thinking, I could totally blow it here. Okay, yeah, you could. If they wanted X or Y, and you told them X and Y, and here's Y, and they don't like that, do you want to work at that place? Right? If that's really how they operate, here's your multiple choice. You must decide between X and Y. Pick one and justify it. Are you going to be happy there? Where's the leadership there? There is none. That's all authoritative and dictate and structured, and probably not a happy place for most people. Certainly not at Google. So if you think that's hard in an interview, just wait till you get to Google and have to do it for real, because there is no multiple choice at Google. It truly is that way. Don't accept the premise. Unless it's a well-known, understood domain and there's no disagreement. Here's clearly how we should execute. The stakes are low. We're not pushing the boundaries of science here. Sure. Make the obvious choice, and back it up with data and go for it. Absolutely. Again, leadership is not something that is practiced every minute of the day by everybody every time. It's a behavior that is employed when necessary. And again, most of the time, maybe it's not necessary. Things are going well. People know what to do. You execute on the plan. The plan was well thought out. Everybody agrees, or at least if they don't, they disagree and commit. And you go for it, and you do the best you can, and you never get 100%. Leadership is something different, right? When we're on the boundaries, we're over our skis. We're not in our wheelhouse. No one knows what the right answer is. We got to go investigate it and think about it and experiment. Who would believe it's either X or Y? Who thought of those two things?
Yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah.
It's a fair question in an interview, and it's a very fair way to answer it. I'm an example of that, by the way. Without knowing it, before I had a lot of training, I had an interview like that with a senior VP of the organization that I was interviewing for. And he turned the tables on me, caught me off guard, and I was expecting yet another interview of the same class and caliber. You ask questions, I answer them. He totally flipped the script and said, for the next 45 minutes, I want you to ask me questions, Geoff. So the first brief second, I went, oh, this is going to be fun and easy. And then it hit me, wait a second. He's going to judge me on how good my questions are. If my questions are lame, if they're too easy, if I'm perceived as just placating him and being safe, I won't get this job. So for 45 minutes, I grilled him. And I walked out of there saying, well, either he's going to despise me because I challenged his authority, and he doesn't want somebody on the team who's going to be perceived as such a jerk, or this is exactly what he was hoping to get, someone who isn't a yes man, who just doesn't go into a meeting with the senior VP, and because it's the senior VP, will just capitulate and play it safe. I ended up being right without knowing that I was going to be right. Now I know I was right. But that's an example of how you can attack a Google interview when leadership
that's great.
Is something that they want to see out of a candidate.
Is that sort of type of questioning still common? Do you know, like where they ask you to ask the questions? Does that happen?
I think that's pretty rare. I just use that as an example of what could be done in an interview. In assist design, though, you can expect to be challenged. No matter what you draw and decide, they will come at you and say, yeah, but what about? And it's not that they're telling you you're wrong, because there is no right and wrong usually in assist design. They want to see how you deal with being challenged. Because, again, at the end of the day, everybody at Google is challenged every day. You just don't get to come up with an idea and everybody nods their head saying, yeah, great job, Geoff. You go for it. Quite the opposite. The arrows come at you, and it's not in a mean way or a jerky way or bullying. It's none of those things. It's, let's make sure this is really solid. Let's see where the holes are in this, because we can't afford to go to scale and this not be right. And so that is a part of the process, is being challenged so that issues get elevated and mitigated, or just, oh no, we were wrong about that. This is fine.
Got it. So are there any other examples that you can share of these sorts of questions practically that could come up in this leadership type interview, whether it's for an engineering manager or even a different role, a product manager?
Sure.
Are there any that come to mind?
They vary by role, for sure.
Okay.
A product manager, for example, is someone who doesn't have any authority at all. None. That role requires tremendous influencing skills, for example. And so you want someone who is extremely communicative, can just absorb data, make sense of it, and get people to either agree or disagree. Come to the table and let's get consensus. That's what you want in a product manager. Because they can't say, I've decided that. Right? For a PM, there is no I've decided that. Engineering would look and just snicker and say, yeah, okay, good. See how far that gets you. But win me over, win over my heart and gut by influencing me. Yeah, now you've got me. And by the way, that's a much better way to go forward than by dictate. It's harder to do. It takes more time, more energy, but you get better results. So that's PM. My favorite kind of question, though, no matter the role, no matter the level of the role or the type of the role, is what happens to the team when you go on vacation? And it's a really simple question, but it is really easy to screw up. And if the answer is, well, 2 weeks before my vacation, what I do is I make sure that everybody knows the trail of breadcrumbs, and I've docked everything, and so I trained somebody to do my job so that they can get by. And I bring my laptop on my vacation just in case, and I've given my cell phone in case of emergency. They will fail that question. In fact, the more senior you are, the more you fail, if that's the answer. It seems like a reasonable answer, right? I'm taking care of things. I'm making sure people know what to do. I'm being responsible. And I don't want things to go bad when I'm on vacation, so interrupt me if you need to. But that's not leadership. That doesn't demonstrate leadership at all. In fact, it demonstrates quite the reverse. What it tells me is you don't trust anybody, because if you're contactable while you're supposed to be away, you're telling people, I don't really trust you. So call me and I'll bail you out if I have to and forego my vacation. If you're in a management or a very senior authority role, it sets a very bad model. Others will look up to you and say, well, Geoff is interruptible on his vacation, so I have to be as well. And this is a really great way to make sure that no one enjoys their vacation or really gets a vacation. So a far better way to answer a question like that is to talk about, it's never a problem because, first of all, when I'm away, people know I'm away. I tell them I won't be answering my cell phone. And good luck to you. But, well before that, like months and months before, an eyedropper's worth per day. I have been instilling trust and empowerment in the team. I drop her a day, every single day, so that by the time I go on my vacation, they're prepared. They can do it. They can handle it. That's part of my job anyway, is to make sure that I'm out of a job, that they don't need me, that I'm not a single source of truth or information or failure. That is a great way to answer how can I make sure I'm not needed here.
Yeah, the first part of what you mentioned there is just the setting the right tone and just the mental health of everyone on the team.
Yeah.
So if you're not really offline, then people are going to know that. And then, even in Google and Netflix and a bunch of companies who don't necessarily have a formal policy for like the number of days you can take off, they can say, oh yeah, just take off whenever you need to. That actually turns into, that's actually not true. What really happens is people just follow their manager. They just follow what their manager does.
Yeah. Right.
And that they actually set the expectation.
Yep. I'm not saying it's easy. It certainly wasn't easy for me
No.
to be on vacation. I'm wondering, how are they doing? I wonder if they're doing okay. But that was my ego talking. And, the Geoff's actions or inactions aren't going to change the stock price of Google too much. They managed to get by just
right. Right. And is this a question that you ask? So you do some career coaching and you help people who are interviewing at Google. Is this a question that you ask to anyone that's in a people manager role, or just anyone?
Anybody. Again,
Okay.
if we're talking about leadership, it's anybody, anytime, anywhere. And so even the most junior level engineer probably on a component will be the most knowledgeable about that component. And if that component breaks in production, what happens when they're on vacation? So what have they done prior to make sure that they can be away and that others can take over for them? And if the answer is not much, or it's the usual 2 weeks before I dock everything and put the status down and make sure that the priority 1 bugs are all closed, that's table stakes. It's not a bad thing to do. Certainly not a bad thing to do. Wouldn't ever discourage anybody to do that. But that's not leadership. If you want to exhibit leadership, that takes a lot more time and effort. Has to start a lot earlier. You have to have a lot more trust in others, and you have to spend a lot more time empowering them so that you can do things like take a vacation and enjoy it.
So I wonder, like statistically speaking, how many people really do that? And if you don't have that experience in the way that you just described it, and all you have are examples of where you just sort of rush the last few days and have a little handover document or something, which I think a lot of people have that experience. Is there a way to still answer that question in a smart way where
Sure.
You're still coming off as a leader?
Exactly. And I would agree with you that not everybody is a great manager or has tremendous leadership skills or attributes. Those have to be built up over time. So a good way to answer that, if one cannot honestly say, this is what I actually do, is to show that you have high EQ and self-awareness. So, for example, I'm not too proud about when I go on vacation. I'm not able to leave my laptop at home, and that's a problem. I do check the equivalent of Slack. I do check email. I will respond, and I know that that's a problem, and I have to work on that. If somebody answered the question that way, I'd give them a really high mark because they are aware of what their weaknesses are and what they have to work on to get better. I'd rather have that person at Google because we can work with that, right? We can improve and coach that and nurture that. Than someone who believes the opposite, that, all I got to do is leave the trail of breadcrumbs and answer the cell phone once or twice on a vacation and it's fine. They're not aware at all as to the bad habits that they are instilling in others. And then they question, why don't people trust in this team? Why do we not trust each other? Why don't people feel as though they're empowered? I mention it in every team meeting, yet they don't believe it. Look at your behavior, right? You went on vacation and showed that you didn't trust anybody. Duh, right? But people can't see that.
Yeah.
If they can't see that, then that is the problem. Versus someone who says, yeah, I really suck at taking vacations. I do need to work on that. Much better answer.
Yeah, there's also this level of, again, you're doing this in an interview setting, and there is this level of vulnerability
Absolutely.
and honesty that needs to come through,
Yes.
where you're not just trying to impress the interviewer
Correct.
and just be very definitive.
Yeah, you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You have to be authentic and honest. Nobody is great at everything. We all have our strengths. We all have things that we are great at, but we're not great at everything. So if you can't show vulnerability, if you can't show and talk about and show you've been reflective about your weaknesses, things that you need to work on, then you may not be right for Google. Because Google is the kind of place that will humble you very, very quickly. Everybody has imposter syndrome at Google when they come. Everybody. Doesn't matter the level, the role, the part of the company. Doesn't even have to be in engineering. Google will humble you. Everybody feels as though, ooh, Google made a mistake with me. I shouldn't have been hired. Very, very normal. That does go away, thank God. So if you can't do it in an interview, if you can't show vulnerability in an interview, you've got no shot at being able to survive it at the company.
Got it. So are there any other ways that you help people prepare for this type of interview or the leadership side of things? What else do you do?
Well, I touch on a number of areas. The questions are pretty customized to each client that I have. I want to know a lot about the client, their level, their role, their experience. Having a LinkedIn profile helps a lot. Knowing what level, what role they're going for helps a lot, so that I can tailor the very best questions to get them the highest ROI. So background on the client is important. Seeing how they answer in what would be real life situations. You have another one of my favorite type of questions. I'm not going to give away the question, but competing priorities, commitments, or values. What would you do in this situation if? And there are things that are working against each other, right? Kind of like this X and Y. It would be wrong to say I choose X or Y. How would you handle that? Again, pushing back, negotiating, trying to come up with more creative ways to solve it, not accepting the premise, are all things that I try to help clients with. One thing that's often forgotten by clients, and I'll admit I don't get to this too often, but with some clients who can't do it all in 1 hour, for example, is to help them craft questions for the interviewers. That's always a part of interviewing. Is, hey, Geoff, I've been asking you questions for 40 minutes. For the next 5 minutes, what questions do you have for me? I better have some good questions. By the way, those are recorded too. Those are a part of, you were calling it the folder. It's called the packet. At least it was at the time that I was there. What questions did the candidate ask? If they're lame questions, like, what keeps you up at night? Or what's the hardest thing you've had to solve at Google? Or what can I do in my 20% time? Oh, great. I've heard that 1,000 times. It's not impressive, right? It's not that it's a bad question. It's a lame question. So asking questions that
why is it lame? Would it just because they get it so much, or it's sort of obvious? That
would be of tremendous value. And how are you showing leadership by asking a safe question like that? Can you take a risk in an interview asking a question like, I'll give you one. I'm making this up on the fly, of course. A few days ago,
Okay.
Misha, I was reading an article on the Google Public Engineering blog. It was on recent advancements in machine learning, ML. And I'm wondering, how does that apply in your world, and what do you see as its challenges? Now, a question like that, it really doesn't matter how you answer it. The hiring committee is going to look at that and go, oh, boy, that's not a question that gets asked ever. The candidate has shown they read the blog, they picked up on a salient point, and they're asking, how does this apply to you? And not only how does it apply to you, what are the challenges that you see in applying it to your area? There's no right answer to that. So that would be an example of a great question.
Yeah, definitely. So it's not just it's not just sort of these general questions. It's really maybe you've taken the time to read something recent or dig into some part of the business model or something recent. Then you can really ask a timely, informed question. Maybe it's a little bit challenging. Maybe there's no clear answer. You can't just Google it, right? You can't just find an answer online.
Well, boy, even so, you could ask a question. What challenges are Google currently facing diversity and inclusion in its culture? Given that it's a core value and it's publicly stated, it's in the annual report, it's on the Google public website, it's highly touted for good reasons, but there's a huge gap. Even though Google says this is important, what do you make of the gap that currently exists?
Right.
Again, an example of a question that's kind of putting the interviewer on their heels, getting at something that is core to the company, challenging authority. And, if Google doesn't want people like that at the company, but that's a question that touches your heart, then why would you want to work there anyway? They're doing you a favor by not making you an offer if that's how they feel. But I can guarantee you they wouldn't feel that way. They would look at someone asking a question like that and going, yeah, this is who we want on the team. So my advice is to have 2 questions for each interview. Do not repeat a question. So if you have 5 interviews, that means you have to come up with 10 really good questions. That takes a lot of prep. Then, I coach on that and help candidates craft questions like that. And maybe have a follow-up, because you are getting scored on how good your questions are in that last few minutes of the interview.
So obviously, if you had no questions at all, or maybe one or 2 questions for 4 or 5 people and repeated the questions, that would just be a total no-go.
It's a bad signal. Yeah, it shows someone who hasn't prepared enough, isn't curious enough, is playing it safe, is just filling the time, may not want to blow it by asking a question that they may not want to hear the answer to. Yeah.
No, that's super, super important, and it's always surprising. I've also interviewed a lot of people as a recruiter and also doing my startup now, but it's always really surprising when someone doesn't have any questions at all, which is like, so you know everything about the business.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
So
that is a definite, you failed. You have no questions? Really? I've just been hammering you for 40 or 45 minutes, and there's not one thing you want to ask me?
Yeah. No, I think you're right, though. I think a lot of people are maybe afraid to ask. They have a question, right, or they have multiple questions. They're afraid to ruffle the feathers, perhaps, right? And then that's exactly the opposite of what, in this case, Google is looking for, because that's not what leadership is. So very clear, very clear. So are there any other? I mean, we talked a lot here already, but are there any other points that you'd like to share around leadership and the leadership interview, or any other advice for job seekers around this that we can jump into?
Maybe put a sharper point on what leadership is and what the expectations are. The misconception
Okay.
is that you can exhibit more leadership the higher the level it is, or it's easier to exhibit leadership the more senior you are. And exactly the opposite is true. The more senior you get, and this isn't just Google, this is any organization really, the more expectations there are of you doing well in your role and knowing what to do in your role. The role, the more senior you get, the more authority you have, the more people are expecting, well, Geoff will know what to do. He's the senior muckety muck. And so therefore, the less wiggle room you have, the less maneuvering you can do to battle the status quo, because you're in this authority role. You should be using your authority. So ironically, it's those who are lower in the organization who don't have as much authority. PMs are notorious for being able to do this because they only have influence, and influencing is a leadership skill. The lower you are, the more leadership you can exhibit. So sometimes candidates are confused. I'm only a mid-level software engineer and they're having me do a leadership interview. Why? It's exactly why. Because you'll have more opportunities to exhibit leadership because you're not constrained by that authority role that others have.
Got it. And I'm just curious, really digging into the actual interview conversation itself. Do you find a lot of the times you have this question as an interviewer, you would ask this question about leadership and you sort of give the candidate a few minutes to answer that question and then they're talking a lot? Or is there more of a conversation around this where they can expect to be interrupted every few seconds and asked a follow-up question? Like, how does that actual conversation look like in practice?
So every interviewer has their own style. I don't mind if a candidate says, do you mind if I think about that for a second? That's a really interesting question. I want to make a few notes before I answer. And they go quiet, and you can see them writing. That's perfectly fine. What they're exhibiting is their style, right? They don't just want to blurt out what's on the front of their mind and then have to retract it. They want to organize their thoughts and give a very thoughtful answer. I don't mind that at all. So being quiet and doing that is fine. There are times when I want to check their leadership capacity, their prowess, and I'll ask a question and then I will purposely interrupt them. And it's not because they did something wrong or I disagree or they've triggered me in any way. I want to see how they handle being interrupted. Again, at Google, you get interrupted all the time. There is not a day in the life of anybody at Google that you plan your day from A to Z and it goes exactly according to plan. You're lucky to get that first thing done. Expect to be interrupted. So it is a way, it is a technique in interviewing to see how would you perform on the job. So I don't do it all the time. Sometimes I'll just do it with a follow-up. I'll let them get their whole answer out, and then I'll say, great, thank you. Do you mind if I ask a follow-up? Of course, they never mind. Who would mind? And then I come after them. Okay, so you said X, Y, and Z. I understand that. But let's change the situation a bit. Let's say X, Y, and Z, okay, and now this happens, what would you do? I've already gotten them to put the stakes in the ground. I would do X, Y, and Z, or I believe in X, Y, and Z. They can't change that. I change the situation on them. How do they handle that? So there are a variety of questions that would work. And again, I want to see how do they handle being challenged, being put on their heels, not accepting the premise, admitting they were wrong. Oh, wait a second. No, I see, Geoff. Yeah. Can I take back Y and Z? That's not right. Boy, it happens all the time at Google. I thought these were the right things to do. Now that I've been proven incorrect, let me show that I'm authentic and honest, and I'll own up to that mistake, and let's continue on. Those are the signals that we're looking for.
And it sounds like you're testing all of this or looking for these signals throughout all the interviews, it's not just, I mean, I know you guys have often a specific interview that is focused on leadership, or at least that's what I've heard, but is that really just that one interview, or are other interviewers scoring the candidate on leadership throughout the other interviews?
Yeah, I would say yes, but not as much. It's all fair game in the leadership interview or the Googliness interview. Somewhat in the sys-design interview, as I've spoken to before, like I'll throw out a challenge. No matter what they decide to do, I'll challenge just to see how they handle being challenged. But even in a coding interview, maybe hypothetically someone decides they're going to solve a problem recursively. And they could be challenged on that. Like, how confident are you that this is the optimal solution? Or this looks like this is going to consume a lot of memory. Is there a better way to do this? Right? Or what would this look like if you didn't have recursion available in the language? I see. All right, now they got to think on their feet. If they're defensive, that gives a lot away. If they are, well, let's think about this. Okay, maybe there's another way to solve this problem. Yeah, no, I don't know, but let's work on it, and let's prove it. Let the data speak for itself. There's never just one way to do something.
Got it. And when you say being defensive, and there's obviously times where you can be standing your ground, and that's not being defensive.
Yeah.
But then there's other times when you are standing your ground and it is being defensive because you're not being so open.
Yeah.
So talk to me more about that. What are the signs of someone being defensive and versus someone just standing their ground?
They're acting on emotion and not having any data to present.
Okay.
This is how I feel.
Okay.
Or you're attacking me instead of you're attacking the problem or the solution or the idea. So how can we make this about the issue and not about me or you? That's the difference.
Got it. Very clear. Talk to me more about your coaching then. You mentioned this a little bit throughout the conversation. You're obviously coaching people on system design interviews, on leadership. How does that usually look like? Are you sitting down for an hour and sort of covering everything, or does it take multiple hours? I'm sure it depends, but share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's somewhat customized. I would say the most popular amount of time is an hour long. And in that hour, it's usually broken up 2/3 to 3/4 of a mock where I am gathering data, either through a sys-design problem and how are they leading the conversation, or through direct questions in a behavioral interview, for example, a leadership interview. How are they answering? I'm taking lots of notes. And then the latter third or quarter of the time, I am providing them feedback. That's standard. There are some who want more extensive feedback. They want more detail. They may want more direction. And so they'll opt for either multiple sessions or they will opt for a longer session where we can get more in depth about the feedback. As a coach, I don't see it my role to solve the problem, more so as a way to support the person. So if I can be their mirror and say, here's what I saw or what I heard you say, this resonated, this didn't, that can help them more. So the onus is always on them. It's going to be them in the interview. If I can give them perspective, here's where I see you standing, they stand a much better chance of doing well. Often, well, I wouldn't say often, majority of the time though, those who are really devoted to this kind of practice will continue coaching after they've gotten the offer because they realize, okay, I got the offer, now I got to perform. What did I just sign up for? And they'll continue to be coached.
Yeah.
Now it's not, can I get an offer and be at Google? It's like, how do I manage to thrive at Google? Not just tread water and survive and get through imposter syndrome, but how do I really have a viable vibrant career at Google. And so they'll continue the coaching that way. And that's no longer mock interviews or anything of the sort.
Sure.
They bring in the issue that they want to talk about. It might not even be work-related. There may be something going on in their family, their personal life, their community that may be affecting work, or just something they want more help with. And coaches can help with that too. And I love doing that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm curious, just the what you were talking about coaching for the interview itself. Do you ever, and this is just like a personal curiosity, like, do you ever talk to someone in the first 15 minutes? Do you ever make this snap judgment like, this person is definitely a fit for Google, or there's no way this person's ever going to get a job at Google. I'm just going to tell them to not waste their time. Does that ever happen?
When I'm coaching them in an interview setting? Or when I'm actually
no. So when you're coaching them, and deciding whether or not to help them out.
But I try not to make those snap judgments. I'm taking a lot of notes and feedback for the feedback. So yeah, I might say, they blew it there, but let's see how they do. Some people take a while to warm up and do well. And boy, if I just happen to hit the worst question for them, the very first thing out of the gate, I'm not doing them a service by making a judgment like that. I can help them and say, you didn't start off really well. You blew it on this question because you didn't get the gist of it, or this would not be something that, would pass muster at Google. But, the other 9 questions I asked you, you did really well. Let's go through those. So I try not to predict or judge. It does happen. There are times when I've gotten enough signal after, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes that I'll go, hey, time out. Do you mind if we stop the mock and we transfer this to an in-depth feedback discussion? Because I think I'm picking up a set of patterns here. I think you'll get more ROI out of us not continuing to go into questioning and just delving on the things that I saw as patterns.
That's great. Yeah. So you're really identifying perhaps those issues that are going to come up. So there's no point in doing the practices, mock interviews and so on.
Yeah. If somebody's going for a manager role and boy, they just got no experience managing, and it's clear that they don't know the right thing to do. They're conflict adverse. They're people pleasing. They see their role as I make the decisions and people follow the decisions. There's not too many more questions that I need to ask to be able to say, hey, wait a second, maybe you're not right for management, and let's talk about that.
That's great. And you're saving them a lot of time. Yeah. You're saving them a lot of time, and they also now know what to work on. Maybe they go for a different role. Maybe it's just not the right time for them to apply for that job, and they need a little bit more work experience or whatever. So
exactly.
Cool. All right, Geoff. Well, this has been really fun. I learned a lot, and I am sure our listeners got some really good insights as well. So I think this is a good time to wrap things up. But is there anything else, just before we head off, is there anything else that you'd like to share about Google or anything else at all?
My biggest tip for folks is just be yourself, be authentic, be honest, be transparent. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about your failings. It's not a failing if you learn from it. So we don't have perfect careers where everything that we've touched is Midas gold and success. Be ready to talk about, I really screwed that up, and here's what I learned from it. That was a real mistake that I made. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'll make a different mistake. Someone who can come across that way is going to be perfect for Google, because learning from mistakes and failure is an everyday thing at Google.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Geoff. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So did I.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for today. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. I think there was a ton of great advice and insights that Geoff had a lot of stuff that I didn't know and didn't expect from that conversation. So I think if you have some interest in diving a bit deeper into this topic, obviously if you have an interview coming up, then Geoff is a great guy to speak to on that front. He has coached a lot of people on this. So I will link back to his coaching profile in the show notes so you can check that out. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you can drop me a message. My email is also in the show notes. And if you haven't hit subscribe, please do that if you want to get the latest episodes. And I've got a lot coming up this month. I'm just totally booked out every week with new episodes. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for today. So have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next time.